Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namo Om Vishnupadaya Vishnupadaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namo Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Charini Nirvishesha Punyavadi Bhaktivyadi Santani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Charini Nirvishesha Punyavadi Bhaktivyadi Santani Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Nita Gaura Hare Nita Gaura Hare Gaura Hare Nita Gaura Hare Nita Gaura Hare Gaura Hare So thank you all again. We're going to chant some prayers. Om Jnanasmirandasya Gnanjanashalakarayam Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya-manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Bhaktam Yam Tadasya Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishnaprestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaha Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Charine Nirvishesha. So thank you all so much for this opportunity to serve as we try to present an overview of the teachings of Lord Caitanya. This is a wonderful book by Srila Prabhupada that's based on the Chaitanya Charita. That's the biography of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I pray for all of your blessings to the staff so that we can all deepen our appreciation and love for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and improve our services. So today we're going to discuss chapter 2 of the teachings of Lord Caitanya, which is entitled Sanatana Goswami. It is a discussion of how Sanatana Goswami was able to free himself from his previous occupation and engage in the full-time service of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So each week we start with the invocation, and it's the 18th verse of the first chapter of the Chaitanya Charita. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Veda Santa Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Veda Santa Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Veda Santa Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Glory to Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda, glory to Advaita Chandra, and glory to all the devotees of Sri Gaura, Lord Chaitanya. So this chapter begins with a verse in glorification of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Vande Nantad Bhuteshwaryam Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhum Nichopi Yat Prasadat Syad Bhakti Shastra Pravartakaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by whose mercy even a person in the lowest status of life can find direction in transcendental devotional service to the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada begins by explaining that when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, he then traveled all over India to preach the holy name of Krishna. So he made one trip to Bengal, and while he was there, he went to an area called Malda, where there's a village called Ramakeli. And in this village, there were two government employees who were in service of the Nawab Hussain Shah. Their names were Kabir Khas and Sakraman, and they were the future Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. So it is said that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't actually have any reason to go to this area, but of course, by his omniscience, he knew that his two eternal associates were there, waiting to assist him in the eternal devotional service. So after the Lord met with them, they decided to join preaching movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this proved a little more difficult for Sanatana Goswami. So His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj was speaking on husbands of these transcendental brothers a few weeks ago. He was saying that Rupa Goswami was employed as the finance minister in the Nawab's government, and Sanatana Goswami was employed as the prime minister. So whereas for Rupa Goswami, it's a little more easier for him to leave his job, the Nawab depended very much on Sanatana Goswami. So when Rupa Goswami retired, he collected his, what we might say, benefits. And this he divided very exemplary, in a very exemplary way, Srila Prabhupada says. So we'll read a little bit about this. The silver and gold coins he brought back filled a large boat. After arriving home, he first divided the accumulated wealth in half and distributed one part to the Brahmins and Vaishnavas. Thus, for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he distributed 50% of his accumulated wealth to persons engaged in the Supreme Lord's transcendental loving service. Brahmins are meant to understand the absolute truth, and once they understand the absolute truth and actually engage in the loving service of the Lord, they are known as Vaishnavas. Both Brahmins and Vaishnavas are supposed to fully engage in transcendental service, and Rupa Goswami, considering their important transcendental position, gave them 50% of his wealth. The balance he again divided in half. One part he distributed to his relatives and dependent family members, and the other he kept for personal emergencies. Such distribution of personal wealth is very instructive for all who desire to be elevated in spiritual knowledge. Generally, a person bequeaths all his accumulated wealth to his family members and then retires from family activities to make progress in spiritual knowledge. But here we find the behavior of Rupa Goswami to be exemplary. He gave 50% of his wealth for spiritual purposes. This should serve as an example for everyone. The 25% of his accumulated wealth he kept for personal emergencies was deposited with a Bengali grocer, since in those days there were no banks. 10,000 coins were deposited for expenditures to be incurred by his elder brother, Sanatana Goswami. So, Bhakti Jnana Maharaj was also mentioning recently that because we understand that current times are very challenging, that the governing body uh, deliberated that it would be easier for householders to contribute this 50% after they've accounted for all of their basic expenditures. So in that way, it would make it a bit easier to follow this principle in the age of Kali Yuga. And it's very important that we do so because we're all obviously being taken care of by the Supreme Lord, and it's our way of reciprocating by contributing to these preaching programs in particular. Um, this is actually the best charity that one can do in this age. Um, and when we give such charity, it is of course primarily to please Him, but we also get the benefit that our past karmas are actually erased by such charity, and we develop the qualities of detachment and selflessness, which is very important for our advancement in devotional service. So Rupa Goswami was thus freed from his responsibilities, and he was able to meet with Lord Chaitanya. This has been discussed by us in the previous chapter. And as for Sanatana Goswami, he was still in the meantime employed, so he, desiring to be engaged in devotional service more, submitted notes to his employer, and he engaged some Brahmins in teaching him the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the Nawab was so reliant on Sanatana Goswami that he actually came personally to his house to see him, and he was a bit surprised to find that Sanatana Goswami was not actually as ill as it seemed, and was discussing the Srimad Bhagavatam with his Brahmins. So Srila Prabhupada describes their conversation. You have submitted sick reports, the Nawab told Sanatana Goswami, but I sent my physician to see you, and he reported that you have no illness at all. Since I did not know why you were submitting sick reports and not attending to your service, I have personally come to see you. I am much perturbed by your behavior. As you know, I am completely dependent on you and your responsible work in government. I was free to act in other matters because I was depending on you. But if you do not join me, your past devotion will be spoiled. Now, what is your intention? Please tell me. On hearing this, Sanatana Goswami replied that he was unable to work anymore, and that it would be very kind of the Nawab to appoint someone else to execute the work that had been entrusted to him. At this, the Nawab became very angry and said, Your elder brother lives like a hunter, and if you retire from the administration, everything will be finished. It was said that the Nawab used to treat Sanatana Goswami like a younger brother. Since the Nawab was principally engaged in conquering different parts of the country and also in hunting, he depended largely on Sanatana Goswami for government administration. Thus, he pleaded with him, If you retire from government service, how will the administration be run? You are the governor of Gaura, Sanatana Goswami replied very gravely, and you punish different kinds of criminals in different ways. So you are at liberty to punish anyone according to his activity. By this reply, Sanatana Goswami indicated that since the governor was engaged in hunting animals and in killing men to expand his kingdom, let both of them suffer according to the acts they were performing. The Nawab, being intelligent, understood Sanatana Goswami's purport. He left the house in an angry mood, and shortly afterwards, he went off to conquer Orissa. He ordered the arrest of Sanatana Goswami and commanded that he be held until the Nawab returned. So at this point, Rupa Goswami made arrangements for the coins that were in the care of the Bengali grocer to be used for Sanatana Goswami's release. So Sanatana Goswami discussed with the jailkeeper and convinced him that he was needing to get out for spiritual purposes, and that the jailkeeper would be benefited both materially by taking the coins as a bribe and also in a spiritual way because he was helping Sanatana Goswami to be released for religious purposes. Sanatana Goswami explained to the jailkeeper that he could tell the Nawab that when Sanatana Goswami had gone for ablutions, he had jumped into the river and drowned. And in this way, Sanatana Goswami was able to escape. Because he couldn't be seen on the regular roads, he went via the jungles and he arrived eventually at a hotel in Bihar called Patada. And there he detected something amiss with how overtly friendly the hotel keeper was. And so he confronted the man, who said that he knew through an astrologer that Sanatana Goswami and he wasn't alone, he was with his servant Ishan. That Sanatana Goswami and Ishan were actually carrying some gold coins between them. So Sanatana Goswami was not aware that the servant had actually kept some coins from the ones that were given to the jailkeeper as a bribe. So he confronted his servant and took the coins and gave them to the hotel keeper willingly. So the hotel keeper actually thought that there were 8 coins, which meant, and Sanatana Goswami had 7, which meant that the servant was still withholding a gold coin. Eventually, Sanatana Goswami released the servant because he was not understanding the seriousness of their mission, and keeping coins was a big danger on the roads. So even though the hotel keeper was so impressed with Sanatana Goswami's honesty that he didn't want to take the money, after a while, Sanatana Goswami insisted that he take it because um, they would probably be robbed by someone else while they were trapped. So the hotel keeper then helped Sanatana Goswami to go via the jungle safely and get towards Lord Chaitanya more easily. So at this point, Sanatana Goswami released his servant and traveled alone. With torn clothing and with a water pot in his hand, proceeded toward Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. On the way, he met his rich brother-in-law, who was also in the government service, and who offered him an excellent blanket, which Sanatana accepted at his special request. Then he departed from him and went on alone to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Benares. When he reached Benares, Sanatana learned that the Lord was there, and he became overjoyed. He was informed by the people that the Lord was staying at the house of Chandrasekhara, and Sanatana went there. Although Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was inside the house, he could understand that Sanatana had arrived at the door, and he asked Chandrasekhar to call in the man who was sitting there. He is a Vaishnava, a great devotee of the Lord, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. Chandrasekhar came out to see the man, but he saw no Vaishnava at the door. He only saw a man who appeared to be a Muslim mendicant. The Lord then asked to see the mendicant, and when Sanatana entered the courtyard, Lord Chaitanya hurriedly came out to receive him and embrace him. So because Sanatana Rupa Goswamis had been involved in the service of the Nawab so closely, they had adopted the dress and the general appearance and some customs, of course, of the Muslim people out of respect. But the appearance of a Vaishnav doesn't change the Vaishnav within. This is a very important statement that Srila Rupa Goswami reminds us of in the Nectar of Devotion in verse 6, where he tells us that whatever a Vaishnava may look like on the outside, they should be always offered the greatest respect. Um, and what's interesting is that not just a Vaishnava, but any person um, should be offered great respect, because within the hearts of everyone is the super soul. And we're actually offering respect to the super soul within the heart, knowing, of course, that everyone in general is a servant of the Lord, just that some know it and some don't. So we have to be very careful in that regard. Lord Kapila says in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, as a blazing fire of death, I cause great fear to whoever makes the least discrimination between himself and other living entities because of a differential outlook. So this is a very important caution for us, to always treat everyone with the greatest respect, regardless of whatever their appearance might be. Sri Prabhupada continues, when the Lord embraced him, Sanatan became overwhelmed with spiritual ecstasy, and he said, my dear Lord, please do not touch me. But they embraced each other and began to cry. Seeing Sanatan and Lord Chaitanya acting thus, Chandrasekhar was struck with wonder. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then asked Sanatan to sit down with him on a bench. The Lord was touching the body of Sanatan with his hand, and again Sanatan asked, him, "My dear Lord, please do not touch me." "I am touching you just for my purification," the Lord replied, "for you are a great devotee. By your devotional service, you can deliver the whole universe and enable everyone to go back to Godhead." The Lord then quoted a nice verse from the Vedic literature stating that a person who is a devotee of Lord Krishna and is 100% engaged in devotional service is far better than a Brahmin who is versed in all the Vedic literatures but who does not engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Because the devotee carries the Supreme Lord within his heart, he can purify every place and everything. So we've discussed this point a few times before that generally in Vedic communities, the Brahmins are considered the highest, but Srila Prabhupada has explained that actually um, Brahmins also need to come to the level of serving Krishna, which is a little a step forward for them. Um, if they haven't been trained in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. But a Vaishnav may not be born into a family of Brahmins, but because that Vaishnav is engaged directly in the service of the Lord, the Vaishnav is always offered the highest respect, regardless of his birth or his social position anyway. The Vedic literatures also states that the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not recognize a non-devotee who is very learned in all the divisions of the Vedas, but he likes a devotee even if he was born in a low family. If one offers charity to a Brahmin who is not a devotee, the Lord does not accept it. But if something is offered to a devotee, the Lord accepts. In other words, whatever a person wishes to offer to the Lord may be given to his devotees. So this is Sri Prabhupada clarifying the statements earlier where we had been saying that Rupa Goswami had given charity to Brahmins and Vaishnavas. But of course, we can understand that the Brahmins that he had given charity to were also Vaishnavas. Whereas we understand that in this day and age, not all Brahmins are Vaishnavas. So we have to be very careful that those that we make offerings to or give charity are actually engaged in the service of the Lord, because when we give that charity to them, that charity is being engaged directly in the Lord's service and is actually for the Lord. That is what all activities, all charity, all austerities, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, should be done for him. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also quoted Srimad Bhagavatam to the effect that even if a Brahmin was born in a high family and is qualified with the 12 Brahminical qualities, he is lower than the lowest of the low if he is not a devotee of the Supreme Lord. This is a very strong statement, but this is a statement that is being made by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and this is obviously something that is the highest truth being quoted by the Absolute Truth. Although a devotee may have been born in a Chandala, dog-eater family, by devotional service he can purify his whole family for 100 generations, past and future, whereas a proud Brahmin cannot purify even himself. Lord Chaitanya then said to Sanatana, quoting the Hari Bhakti Sudadhaya, Akshnoho phalam twadrisha darshanam hi tanuho phalam twadrisha gatra sangaha jiva phalam twadrisha kirtanam hi sudurlabha bhagavata hi loke. O devotee of the Lord, to see you is the perfection of the eyes, to touch your body is the perfection of bodily activities, and to glorify your qualities is the perfection of the tongue, for it is very rare to find a pure devotee like you. Next, the Lord told Sanatan, Krishna is very merciful and is the deliverer of fallen souls. He has saved you from Maharorava. Srimad Bhagavatam describes Maharorava as a hell meant for persons engaged in killing animals, for it is stated there that butchers and animal eaters go to that hell. So we might be wondering why the Lord was specifically making this point to Sanatana Goswami. So, as we said, Rupa and Sanatana Goswami were very closely involved with the Muslim community, and so they were actually even disowned by the Brahmin community that they were born in, because to associate with the Muslim community was not considered um, very favorable. They're involved in animal killing, which is something that, as the Srimad Bhagavatam says, leads to hell. And this is why we are advised to always be in the association of those who are devotees of Krishna, who can help us to advance in devotional service to Krishna, rather than being in the association of those who are involved in materialistic activities, because we become contaminated by their activities. So if such a great soul like Sanatana Goswami could have been affected by the activities of course, we know that he wouldn't be affected literally, but as an example, the Lord is saying that he has been saved from their association and saved from the reaction of being in their association. So we also have to be very careful when we take the association of those who are engaged in materialistic activities. We should avoid it as much as possible, and even if we are forced to, in situations that we can't avoid, like in working conditions, we have to really be careful not to allow such influences of their material desires to influence us as well. I do not know the mercy of Krishna, Sanatana replied, but I can understand that your mercy upon me is causeless. You have delivered me from the entanglement of material life. So this is it's a very nice statement of Sanatana Goswami, because he's being instructive again to us. Even though he is such an elevated personality in spiritual life, he is making clear that he doesn't have direct access to Krishna. He is stating to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is his spiritual master, that it is only through the spiritual master that we can get the mercy of Krishna. And so we should feel the same, that without the mercy of the Vaishnavas and the spiritual master, we can't approach Krishna directly to get it. Then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Sanatana Goswami to tell him about his escape from the prison, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami about how he had met Rupa Goswami and Anupam, and where they had been headed now. Lord Chaitanya then introduced Chandrasekhar and Tapan Mishra to Sanatan, and Tapan Mishra pleasantly invited Sanatan to dine with him. So Tapan Mishra is actually the father of Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. The Lord requested Chandrasekhar to take Sanatan to a barber and make him gentle, for Sanatan had grown a long beard, which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not like. He asked Chandrasekhar to provide Sanatan not only with a bath and a clean shave, but with a change of clothes as well. After Sanatan had bathed, Chandrasekhar offered him some good cloth. When Lord Chaitanya was informed that Sanatan had not accepted the new garments, but later accepted only some used garments from Tapan Mishra, he was very glad. The Lord went to Tapan Mishra's house for lunch and asked him to keep food for Sanatan. Tapan Mishra did not offer Sanatan food immediately, however, but after the Lord had finished eating, there were some remnants of his food, and those remnants were offered to Sanatan while the Lord took his rest. After resting, Lord Chaitanya introduced a Maharashtrian Brahmin, a devotee of his, to Sanatan, and that Brahmin invited Sanatan to accept lunch daily at his place as long as he remained in Benares. As long as I remain in Benares, I will beg from door to door, Sanatan said, but the Lord will be so good as to accept this invitation for daily lunch at your house. So this is the great renunciation of Sanatan Goswami. He wasn't accepting new cloth, he was requesting the old cloth of Tapan Mishra, and he wasn't accepting to have a cooked meal for himself daily, but he was going to beg from door to door. So this is a very high standard of renunciation that we shouldn't, of course, imitate if we can't manage it. But we should keep in mind that we have to be in a spirit of renunciation, that we have to see ourselves, while we're not literally begging, but we have to see ourselves as beggars at the Lord's mercy, and that everything that He provides for us, whether it's our homes or um, food that we have, that's all His, and He is very kindly granting us that to utilize in service for our advancement. And that should always be our mentality. Lord Chaitanya was very much pleased by this behavior of Sanatan's, but he noticed the valuable blanket that had been given to him by his brother-in-law while Sanatan was en route to Benares. Although Lord Chaitanya did not say anything about the blanket, Sanatan understood that he did not approve of such a valuable garment on his body, and therefore Sanatan decided to get rid of it. He immediately went to the bank of the Ganges, and there he saw a mendicant washing an old quilt. When Sanatan asked him to trade the old quilt for the valuable blanket, the poor mendicant thought that Sanatan was joking with him. How is this? The mendicant replied. You appear to be a very nice gentleman, but you are mocking me in this unmannerly way. I am not joking with you, Sanatan informed him. I am very serious. Will you kindly exchange your torn quilt for this blanket? Finally, the mendicant exchanged his torn quilt for the blanket, and Sanatan returned to the Lord. "Where is your valuable blanket?" the Lord immediately inquired. Sanatana informed him about the exchange, and the Lord loved him for this and thanked him. "You are intelligent enough, and you have now exhausted all your attraction for material wealth." In other words, the Lord accepts a person for devotional service only when he is completely free from all material possessions. The Lord then told Sanatan, "It would not look good for you to be a mendicant and beg from door to door with such a valuable blanket on your body. It is contradictory, and people would look on it with abhorrence." "Whatever I am doing to become free from material attachment is all your mercy," Sanatan replied. The Lord was very much pleased with him, and they discussed spiritual advancement. So this is another very important instructive episode. Until Sanatana Goswami was free of his material attachments, the Lord was not only not pleased with him, but he also did not discuss spiritual matters with him. The Lord requires us to be free of our material attachments in order to receive spiritual knowledge. As we've said before, spiritual knowledge is an actual entity, Bhakti Devi, and she can't take up residence within our heart if we're not free of material attachments. So what that means is that we may not be able to give up the possessions that we have, as we said before, but as long as we are thinking of these possessions as ours, even if we're using them in the Lord's service, that still means we have attachment. Everything that we have needs to be utilized for the Lord's service as His, not ours, being utilized for the service. As long as we have the mind space and the energy involved in hankering over things that we want to acquire or holding on to things that we have, we're not going to be able to use that energy in order to receive spiritual knowledge. And this is a very significant obstacle in our devotional service. Previous to this meeting between Lord Caitanya and Sanatana Goswami, the Lord had met a householder devotee named Ramananda Rai. At that meeting, which is discussed in a later chapter, Lord Chaitanya asked Ramananda Rai questions, and Ramananda replied as if he were the Lord's teacher. However, in this case, Sanatan put questions to the Lord, and the Lord answered them. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was also teaching us a very important principle in the meeting with Ramananda Rai that's related to what we've discussed already. Ramananda Rai was considered a Sudra because he was born in a lower caste family, and he was actually engaged in worldly affairs at the time, being a governor. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw within to see his deep devotion to the Supreme Lord, and recognizing that, he actually embraced Ramananda Rai and treated him as an equal, actually telling Ramananda Rai that they were equals in love for Krishna. And that very much surprised the Brahmins who were witnessing this scene. So the Lord, under all circumstances, always considers the devotional service of the devotee before he considers their social standing. And thus, he took instruction from Ramananda Rai, which is something that's very important, that the Lord did not see him as a lower class person that he could not learn from. He took instruction from Ramananda Rai. But here, it's very important that Sanatana Goswami is taking instruction from the Lord, because these instructions were obviously produced in literary form then for all of us to benefit from in future. The instructions of Lord Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami are very important for people in general. The Lord taught him the process of devotional service, which is the constitutional occupation of every living entity. Because this is so, it is every man's duty to advance in spiritual science. Many subjects were thoroughly discussed in the talks between Lord Chaitanya and Sanatana Goswami. Due to the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, Sanatana was able to put important questions before him, and these questions were replied to properly. So, just like Sanatana Goswami had been saying, he feels that it was only the Lord's mercy that he was able to get free of the Nawab, to um, be able to get free of his attachment, his last attachment with the blanket. He always gives credit to the Lord for his knowledge and understanding. So, in the same way, he was even giving credit to the Lord for the questions that he was putting to the Lord, in the same way that Ramananda Rai was giving credit to the Lord for the answers that he was giving to the Lord. Ramananda Rai had remarked that he was not able to speak about devotional matters in the way that he was speaking to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he felt that he was being empowered by the Lord to do so. So once again, this is always a reminder to us that no matter how proficient we are in any activity, material or spiritual, all credit always goes to the Lord, for He is always the one empowering us to do anything. And this keeps us in that sense of humility always. The meeting of Sanatana Goswami and Lord Chaitanya teaches us that to understand spiritual subject matters, one must approach a spiritual master like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and make submissive inquiries. This is confirmed in the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna says that one should approach a man of authority and learn the spiritual science from him. So we know this verse very well. Tadvidi pranipadyena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshyanti te jnanina sattvadarshanaha. So, in order to receive proper spiritual knowledge, we approach a spiritual master. But these qualities that we need to have, the submissiveness in our inquiries and rendering service, is very important. Often we see that um, those that are interested in knowing about the Lord are sometimes in a challenging spirit. And this submissiveness is a very important quality in order to receive transcendental knowledge. To approach a spiritual teacher in a challenging way is not going to give us the understanding that we require. And the ability to render service is very important as well. We can't just expect knowledge without rendering any services in exchange. The service actually purifies us so that the transcendental knowledge can actually become realized knowledge to us. Otherwise, it remains just in an almost mundane academic way. So the devotional service is actually um, what we say is even more essential than getting the knowledge, because knowledge is always submissive to devotion. And when we're rendering service to Krishna, he actually gives us the knowledge from within the heart, even if we're unable to understand it for some other reason external. So these discussions between Srila Rupa Goswami and Lord Chaitanya are in the next chapter, which we will be discussing next week. And these discussions are actually the essentials of spiritual knowledge. So we discussed last week that there are 3 stages in devotional service. The first is Sambandha, the second is Abhideya, and the third is Prayojan. We'll recap on this for the purpose of understanding this knowledge that Lord Chaitanya is going to give Sanatana Goswami. So Sambandha is the process of getting the fundamental knowledge of us being spirit souls, understanding our position, how we have the marginal nature of being spiritual, but having fallen into the material world and being under the control of material nature and suffering accordingly. How we need to realize that we're souls distinct from the body, um, realize that we have a constitutional position of devotional service, and then start engaging in that devotional service, realizing the position of Krishna supreme. And then when we properly realize this in the correct and full way, then we start engaging in real devotional service. That stage is called Abhideya. And of course, the last stage is Prayojan, where engagement in devotional service leads to pure love for Krishna. So the knowledge that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave Rupa Goswami is actually in the level of Abhideya. This is about rendering devotional service to Krishna in the actual literal sense. The fundamental knowledge of the body, the soul, material nature, the Supreme Lord, that is all granted to Sanatana Goswami. So that is knowledge in the Sambandha area. And this is very important knowledge for us to realize in order to reach Avideya and to be rendering pure devotional service to Krishna. So this is the importance of these discussions, and we will begin that chapter next week. So please join us. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Shri Shantai Gaurahari Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for the wonderful class.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the service.
Hare Krishna, Bhakti Kura Paul Mataji, do you have any comments like to share? Or Renee Budulu Mataji, Hare Krishna, welcome.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much, Mataji, for wonderful class. My realize is that transcendental knowledge without devotional service is impossible, and knowledge in general, it's a mundane, a material knowledge. This I understand, and this is my mind. Thank you very much for wonderful class. I Dandavam Pranam Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the service. Actually, it's very true. Transcendental knowledge is always actually it's described that knowledge and renunciation are actually secondary to devotional service. That both actually follow in devotional service, but without devotional service, neither will actually be able to bring us to devotional service. So it means that devotional service is independent of the two, but those two are not independent of devotional service. And this is why Krishna guarantees us that if we're engaging in devotional service, if there's any impediment to us gaining knowledge, he will still give us that knowledge within the heart. And the result of devotional service and knowledge of Krishna is that we're able to serve him better. We have to, Sri Prabhupada always said that we have to have a balance between the two. That if we have religion without philosophy, then it's just sentiment. And if we have philosophy without religion, then it's just dry speculation. So we have to have a balance of both. And devotional service, of course, is more essential to attaining knowledge than the other way around. So that's my understanding. So any other comments or questions? Okay. Isn't, then we will sing a little bhajan by Narottam Das Thakur. Evara Karuna Koro. In glorification of the Vaishnavas. We're going to be discussing the most extraordinary Vaishnavas, the six Goswamis. This is a nice glorification. E bharo karuna koro Vaishnava Gosai E bharo karuna koro Vaishnava Gosai Patita Pavana Tumadine ke hona Patita Pavana Tumadine ke hona Yahara nigate gere Papa Durga Yahara nigate gere Papa Durga Emonu doyala Prabhu ke pakotaka Emonu doyala Prabhu ke pakotaka Angara parasa hore Ashate Gangara parasha hare Ashate Darshane kavita koro tumara gan Darshane Hare Harina Sumastane Aka Radhe Nahi Parisan Sumastane Aka Radhe Nahi Parisan Tumhara Hridoye Sada Govinda Vishram Tumhara Hridoye Sada Govinda Vishram Govinda Kohena Mora Vaishnava Paran Govinda Kohena Mora Vaishnava Paran Rati Janne Koriya Sarane Aduri Rati Janne Koriya Sarane Aduri Narotane Goro Toya Apanari Gori Narotane Goro Toya Apanari Gori Evaro Koruna Koro Vaishnava Gosai Devaro Karuna Guru Vaishnava Gosai Patita Bhavana Tuma Binike Bunai Patita Bhavana Tuma Binike Bunai Jaya Vaishnava Thakur 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Bol, 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 Gaura Hare Bol, Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada, Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Shri Sanatana Goswami ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. So read the translation. O Vaishnav Goswami, please be merciful to me now. There is no one except you who can purify the fallen soul. Where does anyone find such a merciful personality by whose mere audience all sins go far away? After bathing in the waters of the sacred Ganges many times, one becomes purified, but just by the sight of you, the fallen souls are purified. This is your great power. The holy name delivers one who has committed an offense to Lord Hari. But if one commits an offense to you, there is no means of deliverance. Your heart is always the resting place of Lord Govinda. Lord Govinda says, the Vaishnavas are in my heart. I desire the dust of your holy feet every birth I may take. Please consider Narottam yours, be kind upon me. So thank you all again so much for your attention, for giving us the service, for discussing these wonderful topics, and join us next week for teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Shri Shantai Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Jai, Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna.